Okay, let's unpack this modern dating thing. Ever feel like you're just kind of lost out there? Like you're in a jungle, maybe?
Oh, absolutely. It's a common feeling, I think. Like you're supposed to know the rules, but nobody actually gave you the rule book.
Right. So many weird signals, different paths. You don't even know if you're going the right way. Maybe that sounds familiar to folks listening.
I'd imagine so. It seems more complex now, maybe more undefined than it used to be.
Totally. And that's what we're diving into today. We've got two really interesting perspectives you shared. First, this modern dating scene, a survival guide from livereal.com,
Hmm.
and then the complete guide to achieving success in modern dating
Hmm.
by MJ Emanuela over on Medium.
Yeah.
And they seem, well, pretty different, right?
They really do approach it from different angles. Livereal.com, they're trying to give you like a rough map, as they call it,
Okay.
to help you navigate it all with, maybe less suffering. They talk about moving from the dream to the reality.
The dream, like the Hollywood version.
Exactly. And then Emanuela's guide, it feels much more direct, almost like tactical advice.
Yeah, punchy's a good word. She kind of frames it from her own experience, right? Feeling it, dating, and then theorizing about it.
Pretty much. It's very specific, almost like a toolkit based on what she's seen and the patterns she thinks she's identified.
Okay, so our mission today,
Yeah.
for everyone tuning in, is to really dig into both of these. We want to synthesize the key ideas, give you a clearer picture of the challenges, maybe some strategies.
And it's worth noting, like LiveRail.com points out themselves, we're kind of operating without clear guidelines or societal support for building relationships these days.
Which is wild when you think about it. So let's start with that gap Liverpool mentions between expectations and reality.
Right, the Disney and Hollywood dream versus the reality they paint with that anecdote.
Yeah, the story about the modern princess juggling her career, having doubts, both people wondering if they're settling. It's pretty bleak.
It is. But what's the key takeaway there, do you think?
For me, it's like, bam, shatters that effortless romance idea immediately. It throws you straight into the mess. Careers, doubts, past baggage, divorce even.
Uh-huh.
But their point, they say, is to help us get disillusioned. Lose the illusions, but hopefully without all the trauma first.
Sort of a preventative dose of reality.
Yeah, and that connects to that really stark quote they include from Shelby Steele about this being maybe the most interpersonally alienated generation in history.
Wow. It definitely sets the stage for the challenges, doesn't it? The difficulty in just forming meaningful connections today.
Okay, so how does Live Real break this down? They have these three bull models, they call them. The first one is the numbers game.
Ah, yes, the experiment.
Yeah.
20 men, 20 women, hidden ranking.
Right, and only 5 minutes to pair up with the best number they can find. Sounds kind of brutal.
It does, but what's fascinating is how quickly people seem to assess each other, even without knowing their own rank.
So people just sort of,
Yeah. It seemed like the higher ranked people were snapped up quickly, while the lower ranked ones had a harder time. The insight, I think, is how much of that initial attraction might be a quick, maybe subconscious judgment of perceived value.
even though they said the outcome was remarkably successful, people pairing off close to their rank. It's like this cold calculation happening underneath the search for romance.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How much are we all doing that, consciously or not? Do we have our own internal ranking systems?
Hmm. Then there's the modern dating game. They say the arenas change, work meet cutes become dating apps, but the game's the same.
Basically, yeah. The fundamental principles, the underlying dynamics of assessment, competition, signaling interest, those probably persist.
So swiping right, isn't that different from trying to catch someone's eye across a room, fundamentally?
In terms of the underlying goal of mate selection, maybe not. The etiquette changes, the tools change, but maybe some core human behaviors are pretty constant.
Okay, and the third model, the jungle. This is where they bring in evolutionary biology.
Right, comparing us to animals. Like that hanging fly example, with the male bringing a gift, a nuptial offering.
It feels a bit reductive, maybe, but what's the core idea?
The idea is that a lot of attraction might be unconscious, driven by genetic control, as they put it. You don't think, good genetic legacy. You just feel attracted.
Ah, okay. So those initial butterflies might be like ancient programming.
That's the suggestion. Your brain's picking up on cues related to health, fertility, whatever, even if you're not aware of it.
And that quote about the puppeteer, natural selection having zero regard for the happiness of the puppets. Yikes. It's not very encouraging if you're looking for, lasting happiness.
It's definitely a sobering perspective. It suggests our desires might be more about biology than we like to admit. But the article does say becoming aware of this programming is maybe the first step to navigating it better.
Which kind of leads into the next section where they pull in all these expert opinions. And honestly, it's a bit of a downer.
It is quite a list of concerns. Linda weighed on how views of relationships have changed. The Wall Street Journal saying we know less about human courtship than animal courtship.
That's crazy. What theme kind of jumps out at you from all that?
I think it's the loss of structure. That Wall Street Journal point about rituals disappearing, the lack of knowledge, it suggests the old scripts are gone.
Leaving everyone confused.
Exactly. More uncertainty, more ambiguity.
And Michael Vincent Miller talking about relationship wreckage, this deterioration of erotic life.
Yeah.
People bringing adolescent ideals to adult relationships.
Right. Ideals that just don't work for the long haul. And connect that to the social shifts they mention.
Like the divorce stats. A quarter of adults under 44 being children of divorce. Judith Wallerstein calling it a new kind of society.
It adds layers of complexity, doesn't it? Especially if you're carrying that history yourself.
For sure. And then more quotes. Shelby Steele again on alienation, Wallerstein on divorce impacts, USA Today calling courtship antiquated, the porn industry stats.
It all paints this picture of weakened frameworks, less guidance. That journal quote about young women making up rules without adult input on love and commitment.
It's like everyone's just winging it.
In a way, yes. Navigating a landscape with fewer signposts and more individual interpretations.
Harville Hendricks says marriage had a revolution, but our hearts haven't caught up. John Eldridge on gender confusion. It feels like totally uncharted waters.
And Live Real tries to give some historical context for why. Hendricks again saying singles lack maturity, have fantasy world ideas about love.
What kind of fantasy ideas do you think? Like soulmates instantly recognizing each other.
Maybe that. Or that love conquers all without real work. And then they list all those massive changes. Sexual revolution, divorce, birth control, hookup culture, apps, cohabitation as trial marriage.
It's a huge list. Sex as sport, relationships interfering with careers, kids interfering. It really feels like everything's been thrown up in the air.
And their core assertion is this idea of the death of God, not religiously necessarily, but the death of tradition, shared rules, that loss of a common framework.
How does that play out in dating, do you think? That lack of shared rules?
Well, it makes it harder to know what to expect, right? What's normal? What are the steps? Leads to confusion, miscommunication.
Yeah. And that Larissa Phillips quote about the exhaustion from cycles of relationships and breakups after divorce.
Wow. And Barbara Defoe, Whitehead, on women's education, changing mating patterns, courtship disappearing.
It suggests these big societal shifts have fundamentally altered how we connect, or try to. So the takeaway for listeners is maybe the struggles aren't just personal. They're rooted in these bigger changes.
It's complex. Increased freedom, yes, but also new hurdles.
Definitely. Okay, so maybe let's switch gears to MJ Emanuela's perspective now.
Right, the complete guide. She starts with this idea of the relationship escalator. What's that about?
So she maps out these typical stages, right? From just meeting someone to being fully committed.
Like, there's talking, but it's not exclusive yet. Then maybe going on one date, still not really dating. Then actual dating, more frequent but casual. Then dating exclusively, which means monogamy, expectations. And finally, in a relationship, a defined commitment.
It's like putting labels on things that often feel kind of fuzzy.
Exactly. And the value is maybe recognizing these stages and where you might actually be with someone.
And she really flags those undefined zones, doesn't she? Like friends with benefits, situationships. She calls some of them a situation of clowns, which is pretty blunt.
Yeah, she's direct. Her main point there is that anything that's almost a relationship but not quite, it isn't one. Don't treat it like one emotionally.
That probably hits home for a lot of people stuck in ambiguity.
I'd imagine so.
Okay, now this next bit from Emanuela, it's kind of mind-bending. The anti-seductive traits. Some seem totally backward. Like composure is bad because you don't seem desperate, but desperation is also bad. It's like you can't win.
It really highlights the illogical anxieties that can pop up, doesn't it? Like navigating a minefield.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Text back too fast, you're too available, don't have a life outside of them. That makes them insecure. It's paradoxical.
It is. And the insight maybe is just recognizing that dating can trigger these weird, anxious reactions in people, including ourselves.
And vulnerability being seen as raz and bad. Isn't that supposed to be key for connection? And being funny gets you clown zoned.
It reflects a certain cynicism, maybe, about the games people play. She seems to be pointing out how contradictory people's judgments can be.
Yeah, maybe it helps you feel less crazy if you felt like just being yourself was somehow the wrong move,
Possibly. Then she gets into attachment theory.
right? Secure, avoidant, anxious, and fearful, anxious, avoidant. The chameleon one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she suggests that in healthy, defined relationships, you'll likely see secure styles. But in those messy, undefined situations, that's where the insecure styles often show up more. And crucially, she points out that our behavior projecting, avoiding talks, can actually influence how we get perceived, attachment-wise.
So we might be contributing to the dynamic we're experiencing.
That's the implication. The insight is to look at your own patterns.
Her advice for forming secure attachments seems solid, though. Not confusing chaos and passion, not using relationships just for dopamine hits, aiming for honesty.
Yeah, that seems like generally good advice for anyone, really.
Her note about insecure styles matching up, but anxious avoidance being triggered by secure partners. That's interesting, too.
It really shows how much our underlying emotional wiring shapes who we connect with and how.
Okay, then she tackles the big one. What are we? And situationships, that cool gal guy thing pretending you're fine with ambiguity to seem easygoing.
Bearing problems in secret.
That feels so common. In her point that the person benefiting from the ambiguity will shame you for asking for clarity. Oof.
It really speaks to the power dynamics, doesn't it? But she rightly says someone genuinely interested will welcome that conversation.
Yeah. Her advice is basically, if you're confused, ask. No question is embarrassing. That's a good takeaway.
Definitely empowering.
Okay. Now we get to the really controversial part of Emanuela's guide. The section titled, Aim to Manipulate.
Yeah.
I mean, she lists gaslighting, love bombing, breadcrumbing, even mentions battery, ironically, suggesting these lead to enviable love. This feels really problematic.
It absolutely does. It's crucial to read this part critically. She presents these tactics, maybe with some dark humor, but they are fundamentally unhealthy, harmful behaviors.
So she's not actually recommending this stuff.
Her warning at the end is key. These tactics might get you a relationship, but it won't be healthy or secure. I think the value here is maybe recognizing these manipulations as red flags in others, or even reflecting on if we do them ourselves, not adopting them as strategies.
Okay, so it's more like holding up a mirror to the really toxic side of dating games some people play.
That's one way to read it, yeah. Like a cautionary tale about what not to do and what to watch out for. The Taylor Swift quote about shape-shifting fits here too, that idea of losing yourself to please someone.
Right, inauthentic behavior. Okay, that makes a bit more sense. It's highlighting the dark side.
Exactly, a warning about manipulation versus genuine connection.
Then she talks about long-distance relationships, practical stuff, right?
Very practical. Texting, creating a false connection, calls being better, needing actual meetups.
And the huge hurdle is someone willing to eventually move.
That's often the make or break point, isn't it? Plus the difficulty with fights without physical presence, loneliness, time zones.
Sounds tough. But she also mentions faster emotional intimacy.
Potentially, yeah. And the need for really good communication, creativity. The takeaway is LERs take serious, intentional effort and a realistic view of the big challenges, especially relocation.
Gotcha. Then, where to meet people? Her advice seems pretty standard. Apps, social media, clubs, events, basically anywhere.
Yeah, though she admits she's not huge on apps personally, but her point about leveraging real-life interaction if you shine more in person or if you're funny,
Just say hi.
pretty much.
Yeah.
But then be able to carry the conversation, read the room, know when to back off gracefully.
Act like you've been here before.
Confidence, basically.
Exactly. Projecting ease can be attractive.
Okay, finally. Breakups and heartbreaks. She frames breakups as sometimes necessary, manageable.
And her point about heartbreak often being about losing the future you imagined or the access you wanted. That's an interesting reframe.
Yeah, less about personal rejection, more about losing a possibility. How does that help?
It might make it feel a little less like a fundamental flaw in you.
Yeah.
And her take that there's no truly nice way to break up with someone who doesn't want it, that being clear is the kindest thing, that's tough, but probably true.
Yeah, clarity over slow fades or ghosting, even if it hurts more up front.
Right. And the emphasis on no contact for your healing, not to manipulate the ex.
Super important distinction.
Absolutely. Focus on yourself. And that brutal example of ignored texts getting screenshotted and mocked, message received. Don't be that person.
Huh. Yeah, it drives home the need for self-respect after things end. Pick up hobbies, learn lessons, move on.
So wrapping it all up, livereal.com asks, is it all futile?
Yeah,
After all that doom and gloom?
right. It's easy to feel that way. But they bring it back to, never betting against love, the power of evolution.
And finding real happiness, avoiding regrets. That Thornton Wilder quote they end with, nobody looks at each other anymore. It really lingers.
It does. It kind of sums up that potential for disconnection that both sources explore, just in really different ways.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. Two very different takes. Live Real with the big picture, sociological, evolutionary view on why it's also hard, the lack of rules, the dream versus reality.
The broad context. And then Emanuela with the very direct, tactical, sometimes cynical, boots-on-the-ground advice for navigating the current scene, including those, let's say, edgier parts.
Right. So for everyone listening, I guess the main point isn't that we found the answer, because clearly the rules are still being written, or maybe they're gone entirely.
Exactly.
But hopefully, understanding these different angles, the big societal forces and the individual tactics, good and bad, gives you more awareness, helps you navigate it all with, I don't know, a more critical eye.
That seems like a realistic goal. Which leads to maybe a final thought, a question for people to chew on.
Yeah.
Given everything we've talked about, the lack of guidance, the potential pitfalls, what personal principles or values can you actually lean on, or maybe cultivate, to make your own map?
Right.
A map for dating that actually feels right for your well-being, your authentic self.